This is the Endocrine System Laboratory. I hope that it helps you to understand the endocrine system and how it functions in controlling the body. Here we see an anatomical model, mostly of the torso of the individual, and we want to learn the locations of the endocrine glands. So if you look up here, there's the corpus callosum, there's the thalamus. Right here, you can't see it very well, but right at the base of the brain, connected to the hypothalamus, is the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland has both an anterior and a posterior aspect, as we've learned about in a previous lesson. Then also, just a little bit posterior to it is the pineal gland. So up there in the head region, around the bottom of the brain, are the pituitary gland and the pineal gland. Then in the neck is the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland wraps around the trachea and just a little inferior to the larynx. And the thyroid gland has embedded in it 4 little glands called the parathyroid glands. Then as we come down here to the chest, this is the thymus gland. In young people, it's very prominent, but as you age, it gets smaller. Then coming down here on top of the kidneys, each kidney has an adrenal gland. Adrenal gland means next to the kidney. Then the adrenal gland has 2 functional parts, the medulla or middle part and the cortex or outer part. And then right here nestled in the duodenum is the pancreas. And then if you're female, then in this location of the body at the end of the uterine tubes are located the ovaries. And then in a male, the testes down below. So let's go through those one more time before we're going to look more closely at each one. Up at the base of the brain, the pituitary, and just posterior to it, the pineal. In the neck, the thyroid and the parathyroid glands. In the chest, the thymus gland. Then attached to the top of each kidney, the adrenal glands, which have a functional medulla and a functional cortex. Then nestled in the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine, is the pancreas. And then if in females, they have ovaries at the end of the uterine tube, and in the male, testes down below. Here's a chart of the endocrine glands, and you'll see a few new ones here. Remember, up in the brain, we have the thyroid, the pituitary, and the pineal. Then in the neck, we have the thyroid and the parathyroid. Then the thymus in the chest. Coming down here, the adrenals next to the kidneys. The pancreas next to the duodenum. The ovaries in the female and the testes in the male. And going around here, we're going to see a couple new ones. Here's the pineal gland. There's the pituitary, shows the anterior and posterior pituitaries. Okay. Then we see the duodenum and the stomach. They have some secretory functions. We'll talk about them when we do the digestive system, but they also have an endocrine nature. There's the pancreas, which is nestled in that duodenum up there. It'd be right there. Okay. And then coming down here, we have the testes, produces testosterone in the males. Over here, they're showing the ovary, estrogen, progesterone secretion. They show the kidney here. The kidney does have a hormonal function. We'll talk about that when we do the renal function. Adrenal glands, which are attached to the top of the kidneys. The heart, it does secrete atrial natriuretic peptide to control blood pressure. We'll talk about that when we're doing cardiovascular. There's the thymus gland. Then up here is the thyroid with the parathyroid gland. So around the world, around the body with the endocrine system. Okay, so this is to show two things. On this one, you can see the pituitary gland. It's connected by the infundibulum to the hypothalamus right at the base of the brain. Okay, and I'll show you the pineal on the next slide. This shows the pineal gland right back here. See, the pituitary would be more forward, and the pineal gland would be more in the back. This shows the thyroid gland, which is in the neck. This is the trachea right here, and this is the larynx. And embedded in that thyroid, which is in the neck, we'll see on the next slide. Now here are the parathyroid glands. They're embedded in the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland, of course, is wrapping here around the trachea below, and this is the larynx up here. Okay, that's the hyoid cartilage of the larynx. Here is the thymus gland. The thymus gland is in the chest. It's right above the heart. And that's bigger in a young person and gets smaller with age. Here's the pancreas. See, over here is the duodenum, and the pancreas is located right next to the duodenum. That's because in addition to its hormonal function of insulin and glucagon, it also secretes digestive enzymes that help the duodenum to continue the digestion and complete the digestion of the food. Now here, this shows the adrenal gland. There's one of those located on this is the kidney, and then on top of the kidney is the adrenal gland, and the adrenal gland has two functional parts, the outside called the cortex and the inside called the medulla. See, this model shows the adrenal gland on top of the kidney. The outer part is called the cortex, and the inner part is called the medulla. Now here we can see on this model at the end of the uterine tubes, these lumpy bumpy structures right here and right here, those are the ovaries. They're shown right here on the diagram of that model, the diagram here, secreting estrogen and progesterone. Very important and powerful female hormones. This shows the male, and down here, just behind the penis, are the testes. The testes secrete the male hormone, testosterone. Now let's do a little histology. The brain would be up here. This is the very bottom part of the brain. This would be called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is connected by the infundibulum, or also they've got it labeled here pituitary stalk. It's labeled by that, connected by that infundibulum to the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland has two parts to it, the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. And you can tell the difference on a histological section because they stain differently. The stains they use, the anterior pituitary looks very dark and the posterior pituitary looks much lighter. So again, this is at the base of the brain. The brain is enormous compared to this. This is about the size of a pea, okay? This is the hypothalamus connected by the infundibulum to the pituitary gland, which has an anterior, darker appearing portion, and a posterior pituitary, which is lighter in color. Here is the thyroid and parathyroid gland. Remember, they're located in the neck region, around the top part of the trachea and just below the larynx. Now, these open spots in here are called follicles, Follicle. They're kind of like storage for chemicals. They're like closets or cupboards. These little cells around it are called the follicular cells, and the cells in between are called the parafollicular cells. Now, over here, embedded in the thyroid gland, is the parathyroid gland. See that right there, the darker one. So the follicles, the follicular cells, the parafollicular cells, the follicles store chemicals. And then over here, the darker region is the parafollicular cell, the parathyroid gland, and there's 4 of them embedded in the thyroid, and these are located in the neck, Now we come to the adrenal gland. Remember, the adrenal gland is attached to the top of the kidney, and you can see there's different layers here. The 2 functional parts, the very center part's called the medulla, and it secretes 1 set of hormones, and then all these layers out here are known as the cortex, and the cortex secretes different hormones. So it's like 2 glands put together. Now here's the pancreas. Pancreas, remember, is located next to the duodenum, and it secretes glucagon and insulin, very, very important hormones in controlling blood sugar, located next to the duodenum. It also secretes digestive enzymes. Here's the ovary in the females. These are all developing follicles which are going to ovulate the egg. We'll talk a lot more about the ovaries when we talk about the reproductive system. Now here's the testes. The testes are just posterior to the penis in the male, and they secrete, we'll talk a lot more about these when we talk about the reproductive system, but they also secrete testosterone, which is a very powerful male hormone.